So it is Thursday, October the 10th. Sydney time, it's about 6 p.m. This is an open online meeting of the Open Source Malaria Project. On the webcam is me, Matt Todd, and Paul Willis in Geneva from MMV. Other people are shown on the left there. That's a great idea, Paul. If everyone wanted to just give a one-line comment about who they are, the chat window will be recorded as well, but it's as text, so we can see what's being written. And this meeting is being recorded and will be put on somewhere in the public domain. Just one question, Paul, which was whether, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce the first name, Joy Garfunkel was going to be joining us. I think she sent through something for Alice, which Alice has posted on the lab notebook. I just wonder if we should wait or if we should keep going.
Let's start. Joey's having technical.
Or you need to. I'm not getting your microphone. Sorry. To make it green.
Is that working? Yes.
I can't hear you. Sorry. I wonder.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, you can hear. Oh, it's my problem.
So
you can try again. Yeah, sorry.
Technical trouble getting into the meeting at the moment. So let's start. She's in now, I can see. So yeah, if I can just introduce Joey Garfunkel has joined MMV on a 3-month internment from Merck, and she'll be helping us out with this project. So welcome, Joey. Great to have you as part of the team.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay. Well, hello, Elena and Felix. Thanks for joining. Okay, so on the screen there, besides the chat window and everything else, is the agenda in the discussion notes section, and that was sent around beforehand, and is online in various places. So if there's no sort of general comments by anybody, then we can sort of just get stuck in to the agenda items. We've got about an hour or so maximum for this, I think, because people have to go and do things. So we can get started with the agenda item. The main item of business really today is probably to talk about planning of compounds, initial compounds for Series 4, which is the new series, which was donated to the project by MMV, comes from originally Pfizer and the CRO. Very exciting set of compounds, which we're only just starting to look at. So that's the main item of business. But before we get to that, we should deal with the one remaining item of business for Series 3, which is the aminophyrin and pyrimidines. Just to remind everybody, this series so far has delivered no active analogs of the initial hit, the very good initial hit, but all changes we've made to this compound so far have been resulting in complete elimination of activity. So we have opened a consultation about the potentially last 10 compounds to make on this series, and that's the poll there that's indicated in the agenda item. If you click on that, you'll get taken to the pictorial poll of which compounds we were thinking about making. Hopefully that poll system works well for people. That's something which was written by Mike Robbins, who's an occasional and very strategic contributor to this project. I think it's a fantastic resource. Hopefully it works for people. I haven't checked today what the winners of that poll were, but essentially all of those molecules were looking fairly decent. I wonder if, Alice, if you were amenable, you could come in and just say something about which molecules are being taken care of by you synthetically at the moment. Are you okay to come in on that? Your audio should be on, according to me, if you want to switch it on yourself. wonder if you've got a technical problem with your audio, Alice. I'll just say something while you're coming in because I can't hear you. I'm not sure anyone else can. Yeah, can anyone else hear Alice? Weird. If everyone wanted to bring up just while we're waiting, it should be a simple thing. While we're waiting, the poll page contains the molecules that we sort of thought were reasonable, but there's been a voting process here that's been going on with some obvious favorites coming out, and the idea was to make approximately 10 of these. We do have some existing.
Could you hear me running down the hall? Hello.
Hi, Alice.
Oh, hi, that one. Yeah. Sorry, it wasn't working for a moment.
Good.
Yeah, I think I'm just getting the list of those compounds up. I think I had a meeting with Patrick a little bit earlier in the week, and we decided that he was going to focus on compounds 24 and 25, and I was going to try and synthesize the other molecules, try and get them done in the next couple of weeks. But just see if I can find the numbers, the link.
That's the apportioning of synthetic effort there, and Patrick is still happy with having a go at 24 and 25.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Paul, 24 and 25 were the ones that you were suggesting to have a play with those metals to try and increase the solubility of the compounds. Oh yeah, that's Alice's new post that she just put up there. Describes what's going on with this series. So that I think, say again.
I think that's great, Alice. I think what might just be worth considering is sort of the overall balance in terms of were you to spend effort on making those compounds, what the impact would then be on initiating work on the new series, because I guess that might be something we wanted to discuss is our priority actually in the core of the project to make a start on the new series, or is it to make these additional compounds? So I think one thing we discussed was actually sort of putting these out to the community on as a whole and seeing if others were interested in making them. So that might be something we need to discuss and agree as a group.
Yeah, I mean it purely depends on how long this is going to take. I think one of the aims of making some of these final compounds, just to be mercenary about it, would be to make sure that the series is publishable, which is obviously an continual important thing for the project. It feels like to get it publishable, we need a few more compounds. Of course, if they're all inactive, it feels like we hit a critical mass. I think if we make a few more compounds rather than just the one sort of decent synthetic effort we've made to date. However, if the synthesis of a few of these compounds stretches out beyond a couple of weeks, then I think we have a bit of an issue. Yeah, that the risk becomes that we put a lot of synthetic effort into compounds which may be inactive in all probability, given what we've discovered on our last screen with this series. So there's a risk there. I think if it can be tied up pretty quickly, then it's reasonable. But we don't want it to stretch on too much. Yes, I agree.
No, I think that's
Oh, I was just going to say, I completely agree with what Paul said. I think there's going to be a slight lag time in maybe getting some of the chemicals in Series 4. So I've started the synthetic effort with that, but maybe it's a good one to fit in between getting some of the reagents in. So try and polish that up as quickly as possible.
No, that sounds perfect, and I guess something will come from a common intermediate, so we can be a bit pragmatic that we might need not to make the prolidine is probably not that different from the dimethyl, so if time gets tight, we could just get one analog to start just to see if that general change of going to a tertiary sulfonomide makes the difference, and then we can always come back and make other analogs later should it look promising. But based on what we've seen at the moment, it looks fairly high risk, and the central problem we've got is solubility for the series, so quite a few of these targets won't address that. So even were we to get a bit more potency, we'd still have that issue for the series. So yeah, that sounds a good balance.
It's interesting. The pyrrolidine was one of the ones that was being treated rather harshly on the poll, so it wasn't doing very well, which is a triumph of democracy. Okay. So yeah, and I think the list as shown, so in the link that Alice just shared, which links to the electronic lab notebook, which is about the final compounds that were going to be made. There's ones in the top box which are ready to go, which are sitting in the fridge, and then the ones in the next choice for synthesis box. Those 10 are the ones that essentially we're deciding between. And there's no necessity to make all 10, so I guess we time limit it and see if we can polish these off pretty quickly. Yeah. Okay. So that if that's understood, then that's fine. It's a time limited thing. All right. So if there's people can keep on chatting in the box then, but we maybe we should move on to agenda item 2, which is series 4, which is the new series, which is this very exciting set. The first item which we were thinking about was which compounds. This is actually a slight hangover from the other series. Which compounds ought we to send to Kieran Kirk at ANU for testing in the ion regulation assay? And there's this, I guess, is sort of ongoing. Alice and I were trying to pick compounds from all the series to date because Kieran expressed an interest in testing some of the compounds from the previous series too. And we were essentially going to send maybe 8 or 10 compounds with positives and negatives from all of the series so far. And again, this is not this is kind of for interest and because Kieran expressed an interest in doing that. Now we can just sort of finalize that list and then send it around to make sure people are happy. But it's a pretty simple calculation just based on A, what's around, and B, so what we currently have without doing any resynthesis, and B, to make sure that we have positives and negatives from both. The initial set that we drew up was rather too heavily biased, I think, towards the near neighbor series, which was series 1B. So I think we need to rebalance it slightly, but essentially I think that's something that Alice and I can look at offline and then just check with people before we mail things off. It's a pretty simple thing to do. So again, it's just for interest, obviously from the previous series. Kieran is as everyone knows, I think, is keen to test some of these compounds in that assay, which is very exciting.
I guess the only thing I'd comment, Matt, was that perhaps just to think about the numbers, because it's quite a bit of work. So, 10 is quite a lot of compounds for Kieran. It's quite speculative whether they have activity. So I would have thought that, even from series 1, perhaps 3 compounds, 2 actives, 1 inactive would probably be enough at this stage, because we're not really looking to see an SER. It's really a speculative look. Is there anything there? So I just think about the numbers, and that then by overloading in that doesn't then have impact on what we might want to do with the new series, where that probably is where the priority for the resource that Kieran has available should be.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we'd make sure that he has capacity, but it's important that to realize that this assay is not a high throughput assay. It's a fairly labor-intensive process, right? So yes, I mean, before we send, we definitely clear it with them. But yes, I agree. We don't want to swamp them. Okay. Yes. Thank you, Alice, for putting the potencies in the window there. All right. So the next item is the initial compounds being made. So there's some stuff that's gone up on the current electronic lab notebook, which is linked there under item 2B on the agenda. For those of you unfamiliar with this set of compounds, there's a link there to the Open Wetware Wiki, which is the wiki page, and on there is linked the Word document, which is the briefing document that came through from MMV, which gives the background to the series and what's known about it. So if you haven't had a look at that, please just download it and take a look, because it's a very interesting and well-written document with lots of data. The link there to the lab notebook is what Alice has been doing recently, and I wonder if Alice, again, if you wanted to come in and just say a few words about a little bit about some of the chemistry that you've been doing recently and what you've been learning about how to synthesize some of these compounds. I mean, we're going after one compound at the moment as a general, but I just wondered if you want to say.
Oh, hi. I've just been following the procedures from the MMV briefing document. We didn't have the a paranitrile compound in, so I was making it with a parabromo as a model, but now we've got that reagent. It seems to be okay. The only thing I would say is that the PIDA step doesn't seem to be quite as high yielding. I think one of the isomers cyclizes and one of them doesn't, but I'm sure I can sort that out with a bit of temperature control. And I had a play with some cyanide earlier this week, and the reaction didn't quite go as it was supposed to, but I'm wondering whether it was one of the reagents which I got from our stores, which might have been a bit maybe a bit older than we would have hoped for. So, but nothing disastrously wrong, just a bit slow to proceed. So I'm sure I can sort that out. And the idea was that I'd go through that synthesis and make sure it's robust before we get any students working on it. So that should be sorted by the end of the week or early next week. So I'm not worried about that.
I mean, the reaction went as it should, in the sense you're still alive.
Yeah, and I've got 10% product, but 90% starting material. So.
Yeah, Paul was asking what compound you're actually making, given you were talking about the parabromo.
I'll find a link to the lab book now to try and show him.
There was one synthetic issue, Paul. I don't know if you have any interest on it. Feedback on this. And anyone else who wants to chip in. There's an issue synthetically with many of the compounds containing a difluoromethyl substituent. Many of the compounds contain that. So essentially ethers, but rather than being a methyl ether, it's a difluoromethyl ether. And presumably that's there because when the syntheses were done by whomever did those syntheses, the reagent that allows you to do that, the Freon, was widely available. It's rather difficult. Oh yeah, Alice, sorry. Could you just mute your microphone a second? Thanks. It's rather difficult to make that without Freon, I guess. And I was wondering, it's a general question, whether difluoromethyl is something which is seen as being extremely important, or whether you think that motif was there because it was easy to make and it was part of a pattern of synthesis. In other words, would it matter particularly if instead of difluoromethyl we had trifluoromethyl, for example? It's a medchem gut thing. Is that an important motif?
I don't think we do that. We know that. I'll have to look back. I'm not aware that they tried trifluoromethyl, so I think that would be fine. I guess it usually just pushes the lipophilicity a bit, which is not what people want to do. But that could be a good surrogate if we can get a trifluoromethyl in to look at that for sure. I know Joey's been doing some work at possibly looking at the route, so I don't know if Joey wants to comment either on the chat or we can activate her microphone.
Oh, sure. Yeah, beg your pardon. I'll do that. So Joey, your audio is enabled. If you want to talk, you need to just enable at the top of the screen and turn the microphone icon green, and then you can come in if you want to.
It looks like there may be problems there. Perhaps we can come back to that if other people have got comments. Joey perhaps might want to type or just see what the problem is.
Sure. I had one other question which just occurred to me while I was looking through the document in terms of the synthesis. Alice, if you don't know the answer to this, don't worry. But many of the compounds that have been made also have, of course, the core and then attached to the core heterocycle there's an oxygen, so it's an ether-based substituent. And I know that we talked about synthesis of that, Alice, a while ago. It's sodium hydride substitution of the chlorine in that position. Some of the compounds which we might come back to later have an amide in that position, so it's a carbon-carbon bond formation. I'm guessing that in the document that we got about the synthesis of that core is covered in there, but I hadn't checked. So these are the amides, the amides that we were talking about. So, for example, the one that was in the document and the one which I've just uploaded, which we'll get to in a moment. I wonder if all of the synthesis information that we received to date was about the hydride, the alkoxide displacement of the chlorine in that position. So the substituent based on an oxygen. I didn't know if we had any synthetic data on the amides where the amide is directly attached to the core. Okay, we may. I guess this is related to the data issue, which we might come back to in a minute, Paul, about whether we can gain access to some of the raw synthetic data. So we can cover that in a moment. Okay, so that's so Alice is already doing some work on this set, and I guess we're assuming we're going to prioritize this set pretty quickly. And once Alice has demonstrated how we can make the core and functionalize it, then I think it'll become quite easy for others to come in on some of these compounds, because at the moment the chemistry looks quite straightforward. So yes, Alice is sort of doing a little bit of both of these at the moment. In terms of the so at the moment, we're demonstrating that we can essentially make the core by targeting one compound. Then agenda item C is the compounds to be made next, which is the issue of what we should be doing in terms of what we should be targeting. Now, this is where the briefing document, the Word document, is extremely useful, because a lot of things are suggested about what we should be doing next already, and that's the sort of final paragraph of that document under potential next steps. And these are all very good suggestions. I guess we should just sort of think about maybe what would be the priority if we were going to try and list another 5 or 10 compounds that we should be making. And a couple of things are quite interesting here. One was that an amide is mentioned. So one of the compounds which seem to be promising is mentioned as an amide, but it's not the amide which is in the document. So there's a number which is different from the structure in the document. Paul very kindly sent through just recently the structure of the amide, which it's referred to. And if you see on the agenda there under 2C, I've just written on the window here under discussion notes, I've got new amide shown. And that's the wiki page for the series, and I just added a picture of the amide that Paul sent through. So if you go to the wiki page, there's a preamble, and then there's the structure of the amide, the structure which is in the briefing document. And then underneath it, I've got a little picture of the pro-online meeting, which is the amide that's referred to as being potent. So that's the amide which was sent through there. That does indeed look rather good. It's referred to as being good, and it is rather good compound. So obviously the compound has attractive features, and perhaps we should think about synthesizing this thing. Partly because one of the other issues which is raised in the briefing document is that perhaps we should be including basic centers to increase volume as a potential fix for half-life. It occurs to me that compound, that amide, does have another basic center because there's a pyridine that's stuck in there, and so that might be a sort of a generally good strategy for playing with the amide linkage, but also playing with the basicity of the molecule. That to me seems like an attractive one that perhaps we should think about remaking. But then also, if we're interested in these amides, we will eventually need to be able to search through the primary data that we've got here, because in the document it's mentioned that there were there were a number of other amides synthesized as part of the project, but many of the other amides failed to match the potency of this compound. So I guess we just have to be careful that we're not synthesizing other amides which are known to be inactive. and there's one actually listed on the wiki page. If you scroll down to the set of 5 compounds which were made and tested in Kieran Kirk's assay, then the sort of negative control there of the negative compound MMV669000, that's an amide, and that was inactive, showed no activity. So I guess we have to be a little careful that we're targeting compounds which are novel there, but it strikes me as something that might be quite attractive to do. I don't know if anyone had a feeling about that, Paul or others, about whether we should be doing a resynthesis and then potentially playing, for example, with the nitrogen substitution of the ring, or changing the the trifluoromethyl on the new amide for something else.
I mean, I think other amides could be worth looking at. I think the challenge is it's getting activity. That they did make quite a lot of amides, and quite a few of them were inactive. So I think we just need to choose quickly. I guess it alludes to another point in terms of it's a bit of an IT challenge for me getting all the data out and into a form that I can share with you at the moment, so I apologise for that. What I can probably do fairly quickly is at least get structures and potencies, so it won't be the full data set that we have immediately, but at least people can see the SAR, and that might help drive the selection. And I know Joey had a suggestion for some amides that we could make. Really, the attraction of the amides were that they seem to solve the rat metabolic stability issue, so they were much more stable in vitro in the rat system, but potency is the real issue. So that would be the main drive for making some of those.
Okay. Yeah, just on the data thing. I mean, yes, it would make searching a lot easier. But I mean, we're not talking about data extraction from the Word document. It's more about just the numbers themselves, correlated, yes, exactly, in some way with the structure, and then we can put that out there in a way that's more easily searchable, I suppose. So certainly not compounds which were not disclosed in the Word document, and anything that's in the Word document we can extract anyway. But it's just the numbers, yeah. And I guess to make sure that to make sure that we know what we've got. If there are compounds in the document which are if there are compounds which are known in the series which are not in the Word document, it doesn't matter. Of course, it may be possible to ask supplementary questions about compounds that we might propose that may be known, but it's not guaranteed that information will be given. It's more just so that we can make sure that we can search on structure versus potency. And yeah, I mean, an SD file. We'll get to the file format in a minute, but something that can be searched would be very useful for that reason, because then it would be very clear about what amides have been tried and what maybe is missing. Okay, so that to me seems like a good way to go forward. One of the other general synthetic questions was that, as it says early on in the briefing document, an attempt was made to play with the nitrogen transposition, so playing with alternative heterocyclic cores. So that I think was item 3 on the briefing document, and there was a panel of compounds there with similar side chains with different heterocyclic cores. Now, of course, it looks like that was done early, and it was decided to go with the core which has been chosen. But I guess one of the things that has been asked in the possible ways forward is maybe now the side chains have been played with, whether to go back to that. That, of course, is something which is much more synthetic work. So my guess would be perhaps at the moment not to play with the core so much, but to sort of mess around with the side chains a little bit. And then maybe if there's a second round, we could think about going back and playing with nitrogen transposition. Is that something which is a sensible way forward? I'm trying to minimize the initial synthetic effort, I suppose.
Well, that sounds a really sensible suggestion. I don't think we want to dilute ourselves too thinly, but what might really help is if people do have ideas for alternative cores, that they could perhaps start to work up synthetic procedures, because then I think usually you'd want to judge, you know, is synthetic achievability as well as likelihood of activity. That if some of them look as if they take 6 months to work to make and they're speculative, you know, we wouldn't bother. So if people have got interest in other cores, why not work up some synthetic routes so we can use that to you know, discuss and perhaps improve the routes, but then also use that for prioritization in the next round.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. I've just seen the suggestion that Joey sent through, which is now uploaded on the lab book. I didn't see that before, I beg your pardon. It's great that I didn't. So the amides are listed as being a possibility from Joey's perspective. So that's a nice accidental agreement of what's important. So that's fantastic, Joey. Thanks very much. Yeah, I'd agree with those. That's very interesting. The point number 1 on Joey's suggestion. Sorry, hopefully everyone can see that. So I think Alice has just put the link there in the chat window. Joey's suggestions, and there's a page and there's a JPEG file, so we can see what's going on. Number 1 there is separate enantiomers. That's music to my ears. Lovely thing to do. If that's seen as being attractive at this point, I'm sure we'd love to do that. That'd be great. So if we can remake and then separate, that would be fantastic.
So I guess
if people are in a
sorry, Matt, I can speak for Joey here. We've discussed this, and really I think it's an important step because you can often see a big difference between either the potency or the metabolic stability within the enantiomers. So really understanding where we are, I think it's an important step. And what we would propose at this stage is that the chiral synthesis looks tough, so let's just do a resolution. And we may have people already in the team who can do that, or if not, that could be a great way to reach out to groups who may be able to help perform just a chiral separation for us.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay. Okay, excellent. That seems really good. So that's essentially that's agenda item 2C for the moment. I mean, I think we have plenty to be going on with there synthetically for the moment, and we have a bit of a plan of what might come next. So I'm happy with that. So the question 2D is about the data, which is this issue that we just mentioned. So the raw data behind the briefing document. I mean, again, this was something that the informatics guys were wanting, so they could sort of play with the data and do searching more easily. So again, it's just the compounds that are already known and in electronic format. The issue is how the data should be presented. Now, perhaps we could merge this item with a discussion we've been having about the best way to share data about compounds, full stop. So this comes a little bit into sorry, let me take a side step. Whatever form the data come in from the briefing document is fine. You know, so Paul, if you're able to somehow extract the data and send that in whatever form, then we can manage that and handle it. So that's not a problem. So Excel, SD, anything like that is obviously fine. The issue, I guess, is generally how best we should be sharing data. And this comes to a point that Paul raised, that the data for the project are currently held in an SD file. And that's the format that we've taken as being something that we think that people can use in the simplest way possible to do something with the data. So to input those data into other programs to play with the data, rather than having an Excel sheet. And the reason for that is just because the Excel sheet seemed to be less useful to the informatics guys. Now, I noticed Egon's here on the call, and he may be very well placed to comment here. So I might ask you a question directly, Egon, if you're okay with that. If, from your perspective, if you wanted to play with data for compounds, if you wanted to do anything with data, then would you prefer to get the data in an SD file, or would you prefer to get the data in an Excel file? Is there some problem with having an Excel file which we are missing, or do we need to be careful with Excel files? Egon, do you want to talk actually a little bit? If you want to enable your microphone, you could talk at this point. If you wanted to talk, you just go to the top of the window and there's a little microphone icon. You click the down arrow and you make it green. Alternatively, we can do it by.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Fine.
Okay. Well, an Excel spreadsheet is not necessarily bad. I do prefer an SD file because the structures are represented in a better way probably than in an Excel spreadsheet. In the latter case, you probably are restricted to smiles, which are not as explicit in information as MDL files. But I think particularly with an Open Smiles movement, I think Smiles is getting better. It's getting more clear on where the problems are, and those are being resolved. So it should be okay. There is also an interesting plugin from Syngenta for Excel, which might actually help here. And I think that will actually even. I'm not using Excel myself, but this plugin should provide you with drawings, 2D structures, depictions of the structures as well. So that might be worthwhile looking at. I don't know if that uses Smiles or an MDL mol file in the cells, but that's because I haven't. I don't use Excel myself. I will copy paste the link in the chat window.
Great, thank you. Just to clarify the plugin, I previously spoke with Chris Saffin about a plugin from Chemaxon that was meant to allow people to view chemical structures of Excel, and it sounded as though to view these things, you also needed the plugin. Is that your understanding of that Syngenta plugin? Do you have to have this thing installed in order to be able to view this plugin?
No, the thing I'm thinking of is using the CDK, so no Chemaxon at all there. So it's this paper in the Journal of Cheminformatics last year.
Okay, so just to come to the wider question, if we did the spreadsheet issue of sharing all the data in the project, that would be very straightforward for people to see. That would allow people to browse the molecules and browse the potency very simply. Currently, we have things in the SD file. The question is there something that we can do with the SD file which would allow people very simply to browse the structures contained therein and all the associated data? At the moment, we haven't made that link, so people go to the SD file and think, well, what can I do with it? Is there something which is easy for us to do to tell people what to do with the SD file so that they can browse it without necessarily installing software?
Without installing software, let's see. So then, I mean, with installing software, BioClips might actually be an interesting approach. I recently opened, and that's not applicable here, but actually a huge SD file in BioClips of about 2 gigabytes with more than 1 million or more than 1.2 million structures. But that's probably not what we need here at this moment, unfortunately. But that would require installing software. Without installing software, so with a web page, for example, for browsing an SD file, I would suggest the Open Docs platform, where you can upload an SD file and browse through it. From there, you could actually also run toxicity predictions, if you like, on the individual compounds.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of you know, an instruction for someone on that page that says, here's the SD file for all the compounds, download it, open it with this thing, this this application, and that will allow you to browse all the structures simply.
Yep.
You know, it's something where you want to, you know, a simple, ideally in a web browser, obviously, but it's something which is very straightforward to do. I'm just trying to think of people who are not familiar with what an SD file is and what it can be used for.
Yep.
The simplest, the most simple thing to use to view the content.
And it's going to be tough, but the ideal situation would be to have a system which doesn't require someone going away to download a program, because I think, you know, all of us within the core team can go and get that data, but in terms of reaching out to other people, that could act as a barrier and a hurdle. So I think we just need to think through it. That's the only way we can make it work. We have to have clear instructions perhaps we could have a brainstorm sort of outside the meeting to find the best solution.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah, I was just wondering. Sorry.
yeah, that sounds good. I would definitely suggest to have a look at Open Talks here. Let's email about that. In case of a website of Open Talks, we would actually only need to upload the SD file once, and it will be available as a browsable data set online. So it would even remove the requirement to download the SD file.
Ah, is there any way of having okay, is there any way of having the software, you know, daily taking the SD file and generating, you know, a site where people can go to browse the data?
Yeah, I think.
So in other words, a constant URL which allows you to look at the data.
I think that should be possible. I'll talk with Nina about that. But I think I mean the web page has an open API. So I mention OpenTalks also because it's completely open source. It has an API, so that means that we can actually, with a cron tab, download the SD file and upload it as often as we like.
No, that's interesting. That might, I mean, that might do it.
In the chat window is an example. In the chat window is an example data set. One question about the SD file. So only new structures get added, right? So it's not that that uploading a new SD file might remove structures. I'm just wondering about some technicalities, whether we should create a new data set or append things to the existing data set.
That's a good question. I don't know. I think we download, change, and re-upload, but I'm not sure if the old versions are kept. The file that's on GitHub is a composite of everything, so it's the one that's continually updated.
Okay.
I suggest these are really good points that we work on outside the meeting, perhaps. Yeah.
Okay, we can correspond about that
Yep.
as separately. That's good. All right, thank you. Would you be able to mute your microphone now, Egon? Sorry, just that it helps with the echo. Okay, there was a point 2E was whether any of the data are needed on existing or known compounds to further understand the series strengths and weaknesses. I guess we've covered some of that now, Paul. Is there anything you wanted to say specifically to that point?
Yes, and I'd like to perhaps pick up on some of the points that are being made in the chat. And both Joey and I think it's very important that we get some metabolite ID on the compounds. So this is actually looking at where the compounds are metabolized, and in particular looking at the difference across species, because the key issue with the series at the moment is that they seem to be rather unstable in rats. But it's important to understand, is this just a rat-specific issue? So, you know, if it's not occurring in mouse or human, it may not be a problem that we need to solve. So that will be important in defining the strategy. And in addition, if we have an idea where the metabolism is occurring, then that will help us with the design of plans, because I think it's hard to know how to fix the problem at the moment, because we don't have a handle on actually what the metabolic problem is. So I think this was what was driving some of Joey and I's target selection, that perhaps doing the amides and remaking the first key compounds are characterizing it, and at the same time get some MET ID data. So we believe we can access this through our network, but if anyone else is able to offer MET ID services, that would be brilliant. It'll probably be just sort of top 3-4 metabolites. So what we suggest is that we have a list of the compounds to which MMV still has some solid sample available. So the proposal was that Joey works through that over the next few days, and that we could then make a proposal to the group of the compounds that we have available that we believe it's worth doing MET ID on, get the buy-in from the team, and then move forwards with that as the key activity.
That sounds very interesting. I was about to say that yes, I mean that may have implications for how much compound we should be making in the first instance. But I guess to answer that question, we have to wait to see if you have any solid compounds remaining. My assumption being that if you're going to do those kinds of studies, you need significantly more compounds than you would otherwise.
Well, no, actually, I think for MetID, because it's an in vitro system and you just do it by mass spec, you only need a few mgs to do it, so it's not actually very intensive. We won't have the capability to go to sort of in vivo metabolism where you dose to the animal and look for the samples. That's technically very challenging and often better done with radio labels. So this would be a simple in vitro experiment, which, you know, a few mgs will suffice.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, all right. Okay, so I guess we wait to hear what you have available, and then if there are interesting compounds that are needed, then we can prioritize those syntheses. Okay. One last, sorry, item 3 was just clerical. I guess this is just making the point that as with any project, when things grow and get bigger and bigger, more time needs to be spent on sort of maintaining documents like the wiki and keeping those things up to date. At the moment, it's sort of me and Alice are doing things when we're able. But there is quite a lot of work which I think could be done by the community. I'm not entirely sure how to access that. I think one of the things that Alice and I can do is to try and be quite specific about things that are needed, so things that need to be done. So, for example, taking the briefing document and converting that into a form that can easily be searched on a website. So essentially converting the contents of the briefing document to the wiki so that they can be found more easily and searched more easily and make it more systematic. Things like that don't need experimental input. So I was wondering about how we get access to people who are I guess literate and perhaps scientifically literate, who might be interested in contributing to some of the to refining some of the documentation. I guess we can put out appeals for quite specific things. It's something that I was going to suggest to some of our RSC contacts about whether we could access people who maybe no longer have access to a lab but are happy to do some tidying up of the text and completion of the wiki and even helping with paper writing and things like that. I don't know if you have a sense of people who might be interested in doing that beyond that community, that we could target, groups of people who might be interested in helping out. If anyone has any bright ideas, then please do say so or contribute that. It's something which I think Alice and I often overlook because we're concentrating on the science part of the project and the synthesis, but at the same time, as you say, Paul, we want to make sure there's no barrier to participation, and that means keeping the documentation in good order. The barrier to participation, I think, is mainly the thing you've identified, Paul, which is the ability to browse the compounds simply. But I think also it's important that if anyone spots anything that's problematic with wikis and project history and those things, that those things are solved. And it can get quite a long list that we have to deal with, and having people help them with the clerical stuff would be a real help.
Yeah, it's a really important point. It's hard to think of a solution off the top of our heads, so perhaps just an appeal out or within our networks if anyone's got any suggestions for anyone who might be interested in helping in that sense. Because in some senses it doesn't necessarily have to be a scientist even then, does it? So
no,
again,
no, it doesn't.
How do we reach outside our network, which may be more science-based? So that might be one for the group.
Yeah. Okay, so that covers everything I think that I wanted to talk about. The any other business was 4A is taken care of. I just want to, before we finish, I'd like to talk about dates of future meetings, because I think that we should be fixing, it's difficult to do this, but I think we should try and fix these meetings a little bit further in advance than we currently are doing. Often these things are arranged because we're coordinating quite a lot of people, so it's often quite difficult to get mutually convenient times. But I think we should at least try and put things in the diary so that people can lock those in earlier than we're currently doing. Before we just talk about specific dates, is there anything that anyone else wanted to talk about that we haven't covered? If there is not, Jerry's typing, but I don't know if it's related to this item. We can think then about when to have a follow-up meeting. It's Egon, the project by default is CC BY. I just like the I just like the issue of giving attribution to the project. You know, it's just proper academic attribution to other people's data. So yeah, generally CC BY. So in terms of meetings, I mean, we're having these. Well, we were having these approximately every 2 months. So it's October the 10th now. That would take us to early December, which is certainly a possibility. The labs here are being shifted around a little bit around mid-November, which will put a break on things for a few days while we decamp from one lab to another. That's a part of a refurbishment thing that's going on. But we could think about having a meeting, you know, we could lock in a day of, say, in 2 months' time, and then assuming that's okay, we can go ahead, and if it's not, then we can reschedule. Would that be a sensible suggestion that we sort of say, you know, approximately December 10th? Let me just check the day. So that's a Tuesday. I mean, is that something that people feel happy doing? We can sort of say that that's going to be the next meeting, and then negotiate about the specific time nearer the time.
Sounds good.
Yeah, 2 months is reasonable.
Yes, I think
that makes sense.
I think that makes sense. I think it would be just useful if everyone is engaged online, because I think what we need to do, there's some important actions that we need to follow up on from this meeting. So really nailing what's the synthesis, what are the key compounds that we're going to make, then doing the MET ID. But we perhaps don't need a meeting to that, but it's perhaps an appeal for people to engage online and really help us make the right decisions and drive the project off on the right foot in the right direction.
Well, one thing about that, Paul, we've been finding the use of GitHub to be pretty useful. One of the reasons why we're giving a lot of time, I think, is not just because we can put the to-do list in the public domain, but also that the way that the alert system works is that if you're watching a certain repository, it's called, if you're watching it, and if someone posts something to that, you get an email that indicates that someone's posted something, and if there's a reply to something, you also get an email about it, and you're able to contribute to that via email. So you don't have to go to the website to make a comment. If you just reply to the email, the comments that you write in the email get posted up onto the website, and that's actually kind of useful because, you know, we know that a lot of people prefer to use email, but this is a way of ensuring that there's a conversation which can take place by email, but which is also in the public domain. So it's actually quite handy. We might, I think one thing we need to do that perhaps Alice and I need to do is just make a little pictorial how-to about signing up for that, because it does require one sign-up, which is a little irritating. But it does require a sign-up with an account and things. But after that, it's quite easy to manage the process, and because it has email, it's quite attractive. I guess one thing that, so let's say that Alice and I will do that. We might send around a short how-to about how to sign up and see if people take to that. We've been giving it a trial period of maybe 2 or 3 months now, and it's really worked out quite nicely. So if you're okay with that, we might just mock up a little how-to and send it around and see if you're okay with it.
No, I think that would really help people. I've certainly struggled finding out how to sign up. It wasn't intuitive.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I think once you're in, it's pretty intuitive, but we'll make a little thing about it. Okay, good.
And then
yeah, again, don't want to burden people with accounts. Don't want to burden people with accounts. It's really annoying to have passwords and things, but it has been quite useful.
And then perhaps trying to be really clear in terms of then what the tasks are, that perhaps, you know, rather than calling this series 4, can we call it sort of it's the trials of the pyrazine, so people know, you know, if you landed on the series or on the page, series 4 means nothing to a newcomer. So being very clear about sort of what the target is we're asking for, and then clearly linking off to the information that people will need to make that decision, just to think about how we can, you know, facilitate making life easy for people who want to contribute.
Yeah, sure. Okay. All right, excellent. Okay, if is anybody else, any other business, or are we done? We're nearly exactly on the hour.
I guess
so. I think
just worth saying that there's been a lot of good stuff going on the chat, that we will capture that and you know, take any actions or respond to comments that are there. So people who weren't speaking, don't feel that your comments will be lost. We we will address those. And if people who haven't had the chance to chat want to contribute, then throw in either by email or contacting us by any means.
Okay, that's right. Alice, are you happy to quickly grab that chat window just so that we have it as text? Done. Okay, great. All right, excellent. If everyone's happy, we can call it a day. And thank you very much, everyone, for turning up and contributing. It's really tremendous. And we will do this again in a couple of months. Obviously, things continue day by day in other places, but please do come along again.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, I will. Yeah. Nice to see you again, Paul.
Yeah. Talk to you all soon then. Thanks.
See you.
Bye.